Europe, the Southeast. One kingdom, 3 rulers, their consorts, their heirs, and none of them destined to be happy. And the kingdom? The kingdom was doomed.
I was very young when I lost my father, and 3 years later we had to bid farewell to favorite places, to many people, some of which I never saw again. And I returned to my homeland after 50 years in exile.
This story is the missing page from the common European history book. It has never been told before. Ferdinand came from a very ancient family. He saw himself as a French prince and addressed Queen Victoria as Auntie. He graduated from the Terzanium Academy in Vienna, the best education available at the time. From an early age, Ferdinand showed a keen interest in natural history, ornithology, botany, and entomology. In 1879, he and his brother August embarked on a scientific expedition to the Amazon basin. They returned with a bounty of specimens, having made exciting discoveries that formed the basis of an important collection. A 2-volume study, The Botanical Trophies Acquired During Prince August and Ferdinand's Sojourn to Brazil, appeared later. Prince Battenberg left behind a functioning state. In 1884, Sophie acquired a parliament building worthy of the name. Government institutions gradually screeched into gear, but Europeanization was slower to take root. Bulgarians started taking sea and mountain holidays soon after their exit from the Ottoman orbit. Within a few years, the capital of the principality shed its Oriental image. Wide boulevards intersected the old neighborhoods, Modern public and private buildings propped up everywhere. Electric tramways clanked along. Electric light bulbs lit up all this, and telephones were installed where needed. A palace surrounded by parkland was erected downtown. European master gardeners designed public parks. Beautiful gardens were created for the royal palace too, in Sofia, at Vrana, Sarska Bistrica, and Exynovgrad. One of the few occasions when Bulgaria was honored by Britain took place in the Varna harbor at the end of the 19th century. The reason was a naval rescue operation. British sailors in distress were taken ashore, and as a sign of gratitude, Queen Victoria gifted Ferdinand a sundial that is still to be found in the Exynovgrad Park. The following text is engraved on the dial. Let others tell of storms and showers. I'll only count your sunny hours. The dial is remarkably accurate, as long as it is wound up twice a year. As was the case with most European monarchs, Ferdinand's life was very much bound to the sea. One of the trips was to Brazil. The noble passengers followed their usual daily routine of morning walks on the deck, followed by a leisurely lunch, then dinner with the captain and drinks after sunset. When they disembarked in Rio, Ferdinand decided that he wanted to have something to remind him of the exciting voyage. He requested an unusual souvenir, that the captain's quarters be recreated in full detail back home in Bulgaria. The replica still exists, though it is not to be found on the Black Sea coast. Rather, it was built at the hunting lodge at Sarska Bistrica. Inside is a sailor's motto, East, West, home's best. Ferdinand was the force behind the transformation of the Black Sea coastline. In 1881, the mayor of Varna, Mikhail Kolony, a man of energy and vision, proposed that a seaside park was created. He was mocked by the municipal councilors, but his dream was realized by the prince. At his insistence, the government contracted the famed park designer Anton Novak, who honed his craft while working on the parks of Schönbrunn and Belvedere palaces in Vienna. Consequently, the new park flowed seamlessly into the gardens of the Exynovgrad Palace. Timely royal intervention didn't end at that. At a dinner party in 1906, Ferdinand talked Dr. Paraskev Stoyanov to set up a seaside zoo. Barely 24, Stoyanov graduated with honors in medicine from the University of Würzburg. His dissertation was dedicated to the carcinomes of the heart. As manager of the Varna Hospital, he pioneered methods of holistic treatment and is internationally recognized as one of the founders of thalassotherapy, phangotherapy, and heliotherapy. After he secured Stoyanov's agreement to participate, Ferdinand contacted Anton Dorn, director of the Stazione Zoologica in Naples, requesting support for the project. Dorn was a naturalist and a Darwinian and was trying to develop his concept of zoological stations. His idea was simple and effective and involved close cooperation between scientists the world over. Thus, the Varna Project joined the vanguard of biological and zoological research. Georgy Duktev was an ambitious young student. His passion for exotic plants led to a chance meeting with the prince in the Sofia Botanical Garden. Ferdinand was impressed by the young man's knowledge and assisted him in getting a scholarship to study in Austria. Duktev returned the favor by drawing up the plans for Bulgaria's second most important Black Sea port, Burgos. King Louis-Philippe was the next to the last French monarch. His daughter Clementine always saw herself as Princess Royal, as was her title. The 1848 revolution forced her father to abdicate. The French monarchy was abolished for the second time in nearly 60 years, and the royal family found refuge in Britain. Louis-Philippe died there 2 years later. Clementina lived mostly in Coburg and Vienna, where her husband was a general in the Austrian army. Realizing she would never be queen, the ambitious Clementina concentrated on finding a throne for her youngest and best-loved child, Ferdinand. She saw in him uncanny resemblance to the Sun King, Louis XIV. She was smart, knowledgeable about European politics and diplomacy, and that made her influential in European courts. Her cousin, Queen Victoria, with whom she maintained active correspondence, wrote that Clementina was the ally she always longed to have and the enemy she would never dare oppose. In order to buttress the position of Ferdinand, whose tenure on the Bulgarian throne was not recognized by anybody, Clementina set about finding a suitable match in order to marry him off and ensure his succession. Eventually, she settled on Maria Luisa, Pia Teresa, Anna Ferdinanda, Francesca Antoinette, Margherita Josefina, Carolina Bianca, Lucia Apollonia de Bourbon, Princess of Parma, later also Countess of Swishtov. She was the eldest daughter of the Duke of Parma Roberto I and Maria Pia Bourbon, Princess of the Two Sicilies. She was born in Rome. Her godfather was Pope Pius IX, and she had been raised a strict Catholic. On her father's grandmother's side, she was a direct descendant of the last French Bourbon king, Charles X. Her mother was the daughter of the King of Naples, Ferdinando II. Maria Luisa had 11 siblings. Her mother had died in labor, giving birth to her last child. Twelve-year-old Maria Luisa was hit hard by her loss. She was raised by an English nanny, Miss Fanny Fraser. Maria Luisa's father, Prince Roberto, remarried and went on to have 12 more children for a grand total of 24 offspring. Maria Luisa was 9 years younger than Ferdinand. Her father, the Duke, agreed to the union on condition that all issue would be baptized into the Catholic faith. Prince Ferdinand and Princess Maria Luisa were married by the Archbishop of Lucca in Villa Pianore near Viareggio. Duke Roberto's firstborn had all the necessary qualities to be a good spouse to the Bulgarian ruler. A new Bulgarian government delegation arrived for the wedding, headed by Stepan Stambolov. The ministers gave the bride a diadem decorated with a fleur-de-lis and precious stones in the colors of the Bulgarian flag. The newlyweds sailed to their new home on board the steamer Amphitrite. The bride first set foot on Bulgarian soil in the Bulgarian town of Svistov, where she was met by an ecstatic crowd. And what of the former Bulgarian ruler Battenberg? After he left the throne, he returned to his native Darmstadt and then joined the Austrian-Hungarian army, where he eventually attained the rank of general. A passionate lover of the arts, Italian-born Sandro appreciated artistic women. After 7 years on the Bulgarian throne, he spent the next 3 years entertaining famous actresses, singers, poets, and ballerinas. A well-known favorite of European royal houses, he only ever fell in love with an aristocratic woman once. When he was denied the opportunity to court and marry Victoria of Prussia, and Chancellor Otto von Bismarck was instrumental in the demise of the proposed union, not least because of his concern for Russia's reaction. Sandro scandalized his family by marrying Johanna Leusinger, the beautiful singer of the Darmstadt Opera House. The morganatic marriage was very much like that of his own parents, who had shown similar disregard for aristocratic convention. Because of the lower station of his wife, Battenberg was demoted in rank and was known forthwith as Count Hartenau. Johanna assumed the title of Countess. Battenberg's sister, Maria, was the first to forgive his last great love affair. He spent the last 7 years of his life a happy man, living in peace and harmony with the woman he loved and who gave him 2 children. Godfather to them was his close friend, Bulgarian statesman Dr. Konstantin Stoilov. Prince Alexander I died in Graz on November 17, 1893, after complications following surgery. He was 36. His sister traveled to Graz in order to accompany him on his last journey and to meet his wife, with whom she had no previous communication. The two held a lonely wake, embracing and tearful, over the body of their beloved Sandro. Today, thousands stand at the westernmost end of the country and look for the train that brings to them the body of their beloved prince. He who came to them as a vivacious youth, whose fairy tale has come to an end. Stambolov steps forward and, after a long, thoughtful look at the coffin, begins speaking. If indeed it is true that, as our people believe, the human soul wanders for 40 days before returning to its creator, you, who must surely be among us, look at us. Look at our tears, the tears of your children. Look at the tears of your people, whom you dearly loved, and for whose benefit you sacrificed so much, whom you covered in glory by your bravery, for whose prosperity you would have shed your last drop of blood. Go and vouch for us in front of the heavenly King. Ask him to help and protect your beloved nation. Today, Battenberg rests in a modest mausoleum on the former Boulevard Ferdinand in Sofia. The initiative to bring him back and lay him to rest there was his successors. Ferdinand's firstborn son Boris drew breath on January 30th, 1894. He was to be heir to the throne, but the questions of the succession and his father's legitimacy were far from being resolved. One of the great powers, Russia, stubbornly refused to recognize Ferdinand as the Bulgarian head of state. The Bulgarians were forced to travel to St. Petersburg and conclude an unfavorable agreement with the Russian government. The nation was divided into Russophobes and Russophiles. The deputation consisted of public figures loyal to Russia. Even so, they were kept waiting for an audience with Emperor Nicholas II. Coincidentally or not, he only received them after Europe learned the grisly news of Stepan Stambolov's assassination in downtown Sofia. Stambolov was a former prime minister, an avowed Russophobe, and leader of the opposition. Five royal carriages took the Bulgarians to the summer palace of Peterhof, where Nicholas set a trap for them. He quoted the Bulgarian constitution. The official faith of the Bulgarian Principality is Orthodox Christianity of the Eastern Rite. The Bulgarian prince and his offspring cannot belong to another faith but Orthodoxy. Only the first elected Bulgarian prince, should he belong to a different faith, may remain with it. It transpired that Russia's condition was the baptism into Orthodoxy of little Boris, who had already been baptized into Catholicism. To his Catholic relatives, this amounted to apostasy and an insult.
I have determined to do the deed at once, to kill my children and leave this land, and not to falter or give my children over to let a hand more hostile murder them.
Deadlock ensued. Ferdinand resisted for as long as he could, but finally relented. In October of 1895, he agreed to go through with Russian demands, but asked for a 3-month extension so that he could convince his family and the Pope to accept the inevitable. Ferdinand traveled to Rome, where an angry Leo XIII firmly rejected any notion of releasing little Prince Boris into the schism. Ferdinand's inquiry as to the available options was met with a cold reply. Abdicate, Monseigneur, abdicate. In order not to be excommunicated by Rome and simultaneously tricked by St. Petersburg, Ferdinand asked Nicholas II to be Boris's godfather. He received a swift reply. I congratulate your Highness on this patriotic decision. Major General Golenishtchev Kutuzov will relate my response to your request and has been authorized to represent me at your son's reception into the Bulgarian Church. Nicholas. The long-awaited Royal Manifesto was issued on January 22, 1896, to loud acclamations in the National Assembly. I, true to the oath I swore before my beloved people, decided to remove myself all the obstacles and made the most immeasurable and heavy sacrifice I can on the altar of my nation. I proclaim to all Bulgarians that on the 2nd day of February this year, the day of Candlemas, the holy baptism will take place of the heir to the throne, Boris, Prince of Turnovo, following the People's Orthodox Church rite. Deeply wounded and suffering, the fanatical Catholic Maria Louisa left for the Côte d'Azur with her younger son, Kirill. Universal recognition of Ferdinand followed the second baptism of his elder son. A few days later, the Ottoman Sultan issued 2 royal decrees recognizing Ferdinand as Prince of the Bulgarian Principality and Governor-General of Eastern Rumelia. The 10-year Bulgarian crisis came to an end. The prince followed this move by official visits to Istanbul, St. Petersburg, Berlin, and London. All the great powers followed suit. Only the Hofburg Palace gates remained firmly shut. Mighty Franz Josef formally recognized Ferdinand's legitimacy, but refused to receive the apostate Bulgarian ruler and defended his position of the Holy See, which excommunicated the prince. After having borne him 2 sons, Maria Louisa gave birth to a daughter, Evdokia Augusta Filipina Clementina Maria. She then fell pregnant a 4th time. On a chilly January morning, and in defiance of doctors' orders, the princess stood next to her husband, who received the traditional Epiphany military parade. They watched the battle standards being consecrated, and officers and soldiers marched past in tight formation. Several days later, she gave birth to her last child, Princess Nadezhda Clementina Maria Pia Magella, and died the following morning, January 31st, 1899. Maria Louisa was only 29. She had spent 7 years in Bulgaria. Ferdinand was heartbroken. His late wife's body was laid to rest in the St. Ludwig's Catholic Cathedral in Plovdiv, the city she loved best. In 1908, Pope Benedict XV reinstated Ferdinand, now Tsar of Bulgaria, into the Catholic Church. When his son Boris came to the throne in the aftermath of Emperor Nicholas II's tragic demise at the hands of the Bolsheviks, he would be the last remaining bearer of the ancient Orthodox royal title left in the world. Ferdinand was a widower for 8 years subsequent to Maria Louisa's passing. In the meantime, he lost his mother Clementina. Although a monarch, he still faced a very human problem. He needed to take care of 4 young children. During Russian Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna's 1907 visit to Bulgaria, he asked her to find him a wife to care for the orphans and engage in philanthropy. The Grand Duchess, who had come for the unveiling of Emperor Alexander II's statue, immediately thought of her first cousin, Eleonora von Reuss-Zukostritz. Ferdinand found her suitable too and married her on February 28, 1908, in Coburg. Eleonora was compassionate and caring and quickly won the favor of her husband's offspring and of the nation. She used her wedding gift, the very considerable sum of 150,000 leva, to build a children's sanitarium for pulmonary diseases. When she married Ferdinand, Eleonora received the title of princess, but a few months later she would become Tsarina. In July of 1908, the Young Turks carried out a successful coup and toppled the Sultan. Legally speaking, the situation in Europe became quite complicated. Bulgaria was still an Ottoman vassal state, hence Ferdinand's princely rank. He spent the summer after the coup in the company of Emperor Franz Joseph in Vienna. The talks between the two were very encouraging for the Bulgarian ruler. It was a warm September day in Rusay, the town where Battenberg was to have resided after abdication. He never lived in the neoclassical palace that was constructed especially for him. Rusay was, and still is, one of the larger ports on the Danube. An elegant yacht sailed downstream, carrying Ferdinand on his way back from Vienna. The entire Bulgarian government, led by Prime Minister Alexander Milinov, waited for him on the pier. The party traveled overland to the medieval Bulgarian capital of Veliko Turnovo. Meanwhile, the French ambassador received a cable from Ferdinand. Today, at 11 o'clock, I will proclaim Bulgaria's independence. Long live the Bulgarian Tsar. When the Russian emperor heard the news, he called the newly minted Tsar a megalomaniac. Nicholas II wasn't aware of the fact that Ferdinand's royal crown had been ready for a month. Ferdinand read the proclamation in the historical Saint 40 Martyrs church constructed by Tsar Ivan Asen II in 1230 on the occasion of the latter's memorable victory over Byzantium. and accepted the Prime Minister's request to assume the title of Tsar with pride and gratitude. It was the only title suitable for a Bulgarian ruler that is respectful of tradition and has a much longer provenance in Bulgaria than it does in Russia. In 926, the Pope in Rome invested Tsar Simeon with an imperial crown. Since then, all Bulgarian rulers until the Ottoman conquest of the 14th century were Tsars and emperors. Now, Bulgaria was on course to reinstate historical continuity. The date was September the 22nd, 1908. The following day, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. The secret agreement between Sofia and Vienna became apparent and effectively put an end to the Berlin Treaty. Tsar Ferdinand's reign was a time of great progress for Bulgaria. The country reinvented itself as a modern European state, built its institutions from the ground up, set up a parliamentary system, created the basis for a well-functioning economy, army, infrastructure, and educational system. However, an important national issue remained unresolved. Many Bulgarians still lived in Macedonia and Thrace under Ottoman authority. Ferdinand saw an opportunity to take over these territories and had no difficulty in convincing the other newly liberated Balkan states to join him. Each thought that it had the right to tear a piece off the agonizing body of Ottoman Turkey and reclaim its historical borders. The ensuing Balkan War was rehearsal for the Great War of 1914 to 1918. Ferdinand declared war on Turkey in the Assumption of the Virgin Cathedral in Stara Zagora. The Tsar assumed overall command and quartered at the Buchjeva House for the entire duration of the conflict. The house was designed in 1910 by an Austrian architect after the fashionable Secession and was one of the first European-style buildings in town. Here, the Bulgarian monarch kept a crate containing a massive gold cross he intended to place on the dome of the St. Sophia Cathedral in Istanbul. Ferdinand intended to assume the title emperor, and for a while his dream hovered on the brink of coming true. The Bulgarian army took the legendary Adrianople fortress. From there, it was a stone's throw to the Golden Horn. However, Bulgaria soon fell out with its allies and was attacked by them. The Second Balkan War saw the previously victorious Bulgarians lose all they had gained. The world watched from the sidelines, still unaware that the greatest nightmare, an all-out world war, was in the offing. The Balkans, Europe's bloody tale. The West never understood the tragedy of the Balkan Wars. Germany's first Chancellor Otto von Bismarck said dismissively, "The Great European War will start because of some monumental nonsense in the Balkans." His prediction became reality almost 20 years after it was uttered. In 1914, a Serbian nationalist murdered the heir to the Austrian-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, in the streets of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Signaling the start of the Great War. Bosnia-Herzegovina was a good example of the confusing world the Balkan people inhabited. At the end of the 14th century, Bosnia was an independent Christian kingdom that annexed the adjoining territory of Herzegovina. During the first half of the 15th century, both were conquered by the Ottoman Turks. In the course of several centuries, a significant portion of their population converted to Islam. At the end of the 19th century, the great powers signed the Berlin Treaty, which sealed the fate of the failing House of Osman. The prince of a vassal state became Tsar and joined the emperors of the greatest powers at the table. He had to battle the Roman pontifex for the privilege to be there. The people of Bulgaria would pay the ultimate price for his ambition, while he officiated at the wake of the dearly departed united tsardom that was his and their dream.